It's decision time. Fight or flight. When the moment comes, what do? Do you fight or do you flight? You know, this response is something that's ingrained in animals to protect them from danger or high-stress situation. And as animals, it's hardwired into our brains as well. It's that fight or flight response, and it's our body's primitive, it's automatic, it's inborn response that prepares the body to fight or flee from a perceived attack, even kind of harm or threat. And so in prehistoric times, fight was manifested in aggressive, combative behavior, and flight was manifested by fleeing potentially threatening situations, such as being confronted, by a lion when hunting for dinner. But of course in today's day and age, we ain't going to run into a lion while strolling in the meat department at H-E-B. But surely this response still kicks in and is very critical when someone pulls a knife on you at the ATM. This is when the response works best, as its original design intended. But you see, those kinds of dangerous situations are very, very rare when our lives are threatened. Yet that fight or flight response is still there within us every day, manifesting itself in other high-stress situations. And it may just be working against us and the people that we want to become in our life. So how do we make it work for us instead? As we look at our life today, we certainly can find high-stress situations that rise up and threaten our well-being. Those rising waves that come up when we have smooth sailing. We have altercations at work that cause us to come home flustered, we come home angry, we're ready to quit or flight. Sometimes, we have important friendships that have become filled with high drama, and we aren't just sure that we want to stick around. We have families that we love that are very fractured, arguments that peaked, and that make you feel like you might want to sever ties. Sometimes your relationships get a little rocky, or sometimes it's just too much, too fast, and you want to break. All high stress, all perceived danger to your well-being. And so unknowingly, the fight or flight response rears its head as if there was a lion at H-E-B. Because it really does not know the difference. It does not. All it knows is that there is some kind of danger or stress that's threatening your well-being. That's all it knows. And it's so ingrained in us is that feeling of wanting to be free from the danger, to run away, to fight back, to flight back to smooth waters, to separate from that which is causing you stress. And often, I think it's because we think whenever the situations arise, we think, well, I don't have time to deal with that. Or I just don't have the emotional energy to put forth. Or I ain't got the finances to fix that. And if I use these resources, my precious resources, on you, then that means I'll have less to use on me. And I don't want to have to give up something in order to do that. Have you ever had that moment when you woke up and you thought, well, I guess I know who my friends are now. When life was good, you had friends and people all around you when life was good. But as soon as hard times kicked in and you were in need, no one was to be found. We all can relate to that moment, I guarantee you, many times over. But on the flip side, I bet you can think of one friend right now, one friend that is going through some real tough drama. And that might be what you call it, drama. And that because of that, you've separated yourself from them in some way. I wonder if they feel the same way that you did in that moment. You see, the problem with fight or flight is that it is about us. It is about protecting you, protecting your things, your well-being, your home. It was designed to save you. And that is what makes a hero very extraordinary, that when faced with danger, he or she uses fight or flight not to save themselves, but to save someone else. That's extraordinary. And it made me wonder, how can we be heroes in our everyday lives? When we think about Christ, the greatest hero of all time, what if in his humanness he let fight or flight kick in and he saved himself instead of us? What then? But of course, he didn't. Jesus, he jumped into that fiery lion's den more than once, filled with danger and death, and he did it all to save us, not himself. And that's why he's our hero. And as such, we look to him and say, how did you do it? How can we do it? How do we go against something so human, so deeply ingrained in us? Jesus, teach us to use fight or flight, not for ourselves, but for others. And how do we do that? Lord, show us the way, we say. Illuminate your gospel. There are many heroes in the Bible. Moses, David, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Saul, and I'm going to throw Rachel on there. And they're all heroes, and you know what else? All of them were shepherds first. They were all shepherds first. David even fought off a lion and a bear who tried to destroy his flock. And so a shepherd's task was very clear. Feed the sheep adequately, care for their ailments, put little band-aids on them, keep them gathered together, and put their well-being before your own. And it sounds so simple, yet that last one is so hard to do. And I think that's why God chose these great people, because they already had that great quality. If they would put a sheep's life before their own, surely when given great power, they would put God's sheep, other people, before themselves as well. God knows exactly what he's doing when he chooses people. Today, Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. I am the good shepherd. And so when we hear this today, it makes us feel really good to think of him as a shepherd. Because of the heroes in the Bible, we think of shepherds in a positive, esteemed light in the Christmas story. But such was not the case back in the day. The life of a shepherd was not very picturesque. It was dangerous, it was risky, it was considered menial, it was lowly, it was common, it was low class. And they were very rough around the edges because they spent a lot of times in the fields rather than in polite society. So for Jesus to say, I am the good shepherd, would have been offensive to the religious educated elite. And as Jesus speaks today, the Pharisees are there listening. The claim to be a shepherd had an edge to it then. Comparing it today, it would be like saying, like Jesus came and said, I am the good migrant farm worker. People's eyebrows would raise a little bit. So Jesus is the good shepherd, and he says that we are his sheep. Now, many pastors will say that sheep are not so smart, that they are mindless, incapable of caring for themselves, which of course makes it tricky for us to reconcile ourselves as them. And that's not the qualities that Jesus wants to bring out in us. But let me tell you, sheep are not dumb. It's actually the cattle ranchers who started that rumor, because sheep do not behave like cows. It's true, they do not behave like cows. Cows are herded from the rear with shouts and prods, but that does not work with sheep. If you stand behind a sheep making noise, they just run around behind you. Cows, and here's the thing, and shepherds didn't like that, or they didn't like it, it was hard for them. The cowboys don't like that when they had to herd sheep. But here's the thing, cows can be pushed, sheep must be led. Sheep will not go anywhere that someone else does not go first to show them that it's all right. You can run a cow off a cliff, but never a sheep. That sounds pretty smart to me. But still, sheep are vulnerable, which is why a shepherd is needed. So while we are sheep, I think it's important that we see ourselves in all of the characters in the gospel in order to best apply it to our life. Because we play many roles, and we need to discover through the Word the different levels of commitment that we have in those roles. So Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. And so the wolf attacks the flock and he scatters it, and the man runs away because he's a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. As we look at the fields of our life, we see the wolf coming. And it comes in many forms. The wolf comes in the form of danger. Wolf comes in the form of high-stress situations. The wolf comes in the form of arguments. The wolf comes in the form of unforgiveness. It comes in the forms of people. And it even sometimes comes in the form of you and me. That's just the truth of it. And all of these things threaten to scatter the flock, threaten to split up the relationships and the important people in your life. And so we don't want to be that wolf, and neither do we want to be the one who lets the wolf in. We want to be the one who cares for the sheep. And so many times we look at Scripture from a place of vulnerability and weakness. But what if we looked at it from a place of power and affirmation? What if instead of the sheep, we see ourselves as the shepherds? Jesus calls us to finish his work under the Great Commission, and by his authority, we are shepherds in his name. We are called to be the ones who feed, the ones who care, the ones who gather, and the ones who make the well-being of the sheep a priority. And I think most of us in here, we all consider ourselves to do this in some form or another at varying degrees. That is, until the wolf appears on the horizon. And the wolf is always a game changer, and the wolf will never leave you the way it found you. Danger and disagreement never do. And this is the moment. This is the moment in the parable. This is the moment in your life. This is the moment that comes in every one of your relationships. That moment when fight or flight engages and you have a choice to make. Either way, the wolf is coming. You see him on the horizon, it ain't pretty. There's slobber coming off his teeth. He's hungry. He's coming full force. And you have a choice to make. When your feet are to the fire, are you going to be a hired hand, or are you going to be a shepherd? Jesus tells us the hired hand runs away out of fear, but more specifically because he's just not that invested. His level of commitment is not as high as it could be. But the shepherd stays. So which are you? When hard and rocky times befall your brethren, will you stay and fight not for you, but for them? When tragedy strikes and emotions run high and you're needed in ways that you've never been needed before, will you stay? When your relationship faces troubled waters and you've had enough, will you stay, fight the storm? Will you row with love in hopes of that stable shore? When your family member runs astray, will you go out of your way to forgive and fight to get them back? Will you be a hired hand? Or will you be the shepherd that God calls you to be? Now you notice Jesus just didn't call himself a shepherd, but rather the good shepherd. And good isn't the best translation because it means more than just not bad. It comes from the Greek word kalos, and that means beauty or beautiful. And furthermore, kalos is not simply beauty in aesthetic sense, but it's beautiful in both form and in function. Something that is excellent in character and well suited for its purpose, of which our Christ is. So how do we go from being a shepherd in our life to being a good shepherd in our life? Because there's a difference. Jesus continues to tell us in the gospel today, I know my sheep and they know me. I lay down my life for the sheep. I also have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen, and I must bring them also. You see, I believe it's those other sheep that make the difference between being a shepherd and a good shepherd. When the wolf comes, it's easier to defend, fight for, and protect the immediate people in your love circle. But it's a lot harder to get in the line of fire for those other sheep. Those ones that you don't even know. The ones that you don't even have contact with. The ones that you do not agree or have friction with. Will you be a hired hand for them, but a shepherd for the ones you love? Then it begs the question, do we truly love the other sheep after all? Whew. Lord is challenging us today. Our third reading today said that this is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has material possessions and sees someone in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth. Now, I don't think there's a one of us in here who doesn't want to be that good shepherd that stands in the gap for all sheep. But the question again is, how do we do it? With fight or flight so deeply ingrained in us to protect ourselves, how can we do it? As always, the gospel has the answer. Verse 12, the hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. Ownership is key. You see, Jesus owns his sheep. They are a part of him. That is the kalos in him. It is the guide for us to shepherd our lives. What if you took ownership of the people in your life? What if you started to consider them as part of yourself? What if you saw your adversaries and strangers as part of the very things that make up your soul, united as children of God? What if you took ownership of them all? Then, whenever the wolf comes and whenever that pesky fight or flight kicks in, it won't even matter at all, because your instinct will be to jump out to protect them because they are now a part of you. And that is what fight or flight does. It protects you, all of you. And like a hero, when you truly love everyone, you'll do it without even thinking. And when stressful situations and drama arises with the people you know that call for you to lay down your resources, that call to give of your time, your money, and your effort, you will now not hesitate to do. Because in good shepherd thinking, it will be like giving to yourself, for they are a part of you. This is the magnitude that is the gift of Christ. This is what he did for us, and this is what he wants from us in return. So when you feel yourself pulling away when the wolf comes, instead of listening to the screaming and the noise and the drama, listen to what the gospel says is calling underneath it all. It is the voice of the good shepherd comforting his sheep. And when you hear that, when you take time to really focus on not on what's going on, but in here, it will guide your reactions, it will give you solutions, and it will guide your giving. And it just might cause you to rethink your escape plans from those people and to instead protect and gather the flock in your life. We are called to be sheep for Christ, but shepherds to one another. Through the word today, we see that Jesus is the fulfillment of Psalm 23 that Noah read. What's interesting is, usually during Joys and Concerns, I take a head count of how many people are here. There's 23 people here. And our Psalm 23 is about the Good Shepherd. So that has great meaning for us. And so as I read these verses, I want you to imagine yourself there. I want you to picture what's going on. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures, and he leads me beside the still waters. And he restores my soul, and he leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. I love this verse, and I know that you do too. And you always find great comfort when you read it, knowing that Jesus leads you to safety. You see yourself beside the still waters. You see yourself lying in the green pastures. But as you picture this in your mind, there is one thing that you are leaving out. The rest of the flock. The shepherd never travels with just one sheep. So let us not forget that we are not there alone. The Good Shepherd has brought all of the sheep. So thus may you also bring them to safety. All of them, for his name's sake.